I'm continuing my way through classical tragedy, Greek and Roman, and I'm up to Oedipus the King by Sophocles, and this is often called Oedipus Rex as well. Just to briefly repeat my background on this or where I'm coming from, I read a lot of Greek myths when I was in middle school, like retellings of Greek myths, Edith Hamilton's mythology, Bullfinch's mythology, that kind of thing. But I never read these plays, so this is my first time coming to this play, even though I'm familiar with this story. Although the next play by Sophocles, Antigone, I actually have read because Antigone was assigned reading when I was in 12th grade at my high school. This was part of the English curriculum. Now, Antigone is a sequel of sorts to Oedipus. And some of these characters in here, like Creon and Antigone herself and Ismene, are also in the Oedipus play. So I'm going to be mentioning that background because I'm vaguely aware where some of these characters are going. Creon, for example, is a major character in both plays. But although Antigone is the sequel, Oedipus the King was actually written later, if that makes sense. It's kind of like a George Lucas type thing, where the sequel, the prequel was released after the sequel. If that makes sense. So Antigone was the first play in the trilogy written, although it takes place last. Then Oedipus the King was written, and then there's actually one more play, Oedipus at, I forget the name, Oedipus at Colonius, I think is the name, Colonus, which is unfortunately not in this edition. This edition here only has these two plays by Sophocles. So the third Oedipus play, I'll have to wait until I find another book to read that one. But that one was written last anyways. So even though it takes place in the middle, Oedipus at Colonus, so presumably it doesn't affect this play. And they were all based on a well-established myth anyways. So the audience, Sophocles was not making up the story. He was just adapting the story. There's an essay in this book at the end by Tom F. Driver, who I've not heard of before, but it was an informative essay. And he says the story of Oedipus was well known to Sophocles' audience. So this is a story that the audience would have already known beforehand. And this, I forget where I read this, but years ago I read somewhere that there was no such thing as spoilers in ancient Greek theater. A Greek would never say to another Greek, I don't know the ending, please don't spoil it for me. These were all myths that they all knew that were a part of their culture. And the idea was not to see a new story, but to see a story that you already know, performed maybe with a new angle. I think the story of Oedipus is familiar enough to most people. But if there's one thing I've learned on the internet, it's to never assume anything, because people are coming from all different ages and all different backgrounds and all different geographical areas. So bear with me here. I'm going to briefly summarize the myth of Oedipus. So Oedipus is one of the mythical kings of Thebes, and because everything in Greek mythology relates to everything else in Greek mythology, all these stories are interconnected. Bear with me. I'm going to switch over here to my computer. Wikipedia, if you go to the entry for Laos, Oedipus's father, has a nice little chart here that sketches out the Theban family tree, starting with Cadmus, who was the founder of Thebes with the dragon, and also I think was the founder of the Theban curse because he killed the dragon that was beloved of the gods or something like that. Uh, Here to Laius, who's Oedipus's father, and Jocasta, his mother. And there are hyperlinks to most of these because they all have their own stories that you can go and look up. So Oedipus's father, Laius, has his own story about his reign of kings and the a rape which occurred, which maybe is the origin of the curse. But so there's this whole tapestry. But at the point that Oedipus's story picks up, Laius and Jocasta give birth to a child, and I guess because Laius is cursed for the earlier rape he committed when he was supposed to be a regent or something like that. The curse is that the child will kill its father and marry its mother. So Laius says, okay, this will never be. We will have the child killed. The mother Jocasta can't bear to kill it, so she gives it to a servant who's supposed to bind its feet up on the mountains, which is where the name Oedipus comes from. It apparently means swollen feet in Greek. The servant gives it to a shepherd, and it eventually ends up at the household of the king and queen of Corinth, who have no son of their own. They're not able to produce their own children. So they raise the son as their own, and Oedipus grows up thinking that the king and queen of Corinth are his mother and father. Then when he goes to the oracle of Apollo at Delphi, he learns his fate, that he is fated to kill his father and marry his mother. And seeking to escape his fate, he actually flees from Corinth, little knowing that his mother and father are not his real mother and father, they're his adopted mother and father. So he's actually running headlong into his terrible fate. On the way, he is attacked by a man on the chariot. They're arguing over the right of way, and Oedipus kills him in the fight, not realizing that the man he killed was actually his father, Laius. And then when coming to Thebes, Thebes at this time was terrorized by a sphinx, which in this myth is a woman with the head, sorry, it's a creature with the head of a woman, a body of a lion, and wings like an eagle, who is posing a riddle to all the passerbys and devouring anyone who can't answer the riddle, which is everyone. The riddle apparently varies from story to story depending on who's telling the story of Oedipus. But the most common version of the riddle is what creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. Oedipus says it's man, who crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks his 2 legs in his prime, and then walks with a cane when he gets older. Correctly guessing the riddle, and the Sphinx is so mortified that she jumps off the cliff and plunges to her death. And so then Oedipus becomes the savior of Thebes and is made into the king of Thebes, because the original king of Thebes by this time has long been missing, and is given the queen of Thebes to marry Jocasta, his mother, not knowing that this is his mother. And he marries her, and they have 4 children together. And this is where the story picks up, or rather, because of the unnaturalness of having killed his father and married his mother and produced 4 children with his mother, the gods have sent a plague on Thebes. So we pick up the story at this point. There's a there's a plague in Thebes. Oedipus is trying to figure out why there's a plague in Thebes. He hears that the plague in Thebes is because the king of Thebes has been killed and they need to find his murderer. So Oedipus declares that they will leave no stone unturned until they find the murderer of King Laius, who was killed before he got to Thebes. Oedipus, the irony, of course, is that Oedipus himself is the murderer, but Oedipus does not know that. And he proudly declares that he will do whatever it takes to find the murderers and bring them to justice. And declares this in very strong language. Now, the audience, because the Greek audience would already know the story, already knows where this is going. And we, the reader, know that Oedipus himself has a horrible secret which he is going to uncover. But finding out how he uncovers it, or seeing him uncover it, is maybe the source of the tension. So even though we all know this is headed for disaster, just seeing the disaster unfold is where the tension in the play comes. As Oedipus slowly puts the pieces together. Now, they because this is an ancient play, they do bring in a prophet who knows everything. And when they first brought out the prophet, let me back up. When Oedipus first announced that he was going to find out who the murderer was, I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. I mean, I as a reader already know where this is going, but it'll be interesting to see Oedipus figure it out for himself. See how he puts the clues together. But then they bring in the prophet, and I thought, oh, of course, this is a myth. We're not going to have Oedipus figure it out by himself. We're just going to have the prophet tell everybody everything. That's how these old myths work. But actually, even though the prophet does say it reluctantly, he doesn't want to tell Oedipus the truth, but Oedipus badgers the truth out of him eventually. Oedipus doesn't believe the prophet. Oedipus believed that Creon is paying the prophet off. And Oedipus, I think, rightly points out that if the prophet had known this truth all along, why has he been keeping it to himself all this time? It seems a little bit strange, and you've got to side with Oedipus on this. It does seem a little bit strange that the prophet has not been volunteering this information before. So the mystery is revealed at this point, but Oedipus does not believe it. And he does not believe it until he is forced to put all the pieces together himself. And then this is where we have the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. So he finds out that Laius was killed while he was out on the road. He realizes that he had been out on the road himself. He becomes a little bit nervous about it. His wife / mother, Jocasta, tells him not to worry so much about these prophecies because sometimes prophecies don't come true. And she gives the example of the baby she had that was prophesied to kill his father and married his mother, but that prophecy didn't come true in her mind because they got rid of that baby. Then Oedipus reveals that he had come from Corinth because he had been fleeing a prophecy, that he had been told that he would kill his father and mother. And then, where is it? A messenger comes to Oedipus from Corinth, and the messenger reveals that his father Polybus is dead, and he's afraid to return to Corinth because there's still this prophecy that he would marry his mother, even though his father is already dead. But then the messenger is able to try to free him from that fear by revealing to him that the king and queen of Corinth had not been his real parents. So he had no need to worry about this prophecy because they weren't his real parents anyways. And then he tells Oedipus that he was the one who gave them to the king and queen of Corinth because he had got him from a shepherd. The shepherd is brought in, and at this point, Jocasta, who is beginning to realize where things are going, is telling Oedipus not to dig deeper into this. And this is not the first time Oedipus has gotten this warning. The prophet also told him not to dig deeper into this. And maybe Oedipus himself, somewhere in the back of his mind, knows where this is going. But either because he is stubborn, or because he wants the truth, or because he just can't let it go now, or maybe he doesn't realize where this is going. I guess you have to use your own judgment as to what his motives are. He just refuses to stop asking questions, even when Jocasta is saying, "No, listen to me. I implore you. You must stop." Oedipus says, "I cannot listen when you tell me to ignore the truth." Jocasta, at this point, has realized what's happened, and she exits stage by saying, "My poor child, those are the only words I shall ever have for you. I can speak no others." And then she is going off stage to hang herself. Whereas Oedipus brings the shepherd in and has him questioned, and eventually realizes the truth. And it's a bit strange when he realizes the truth. You expect kind of more ranting and raving and tearing of hair. But instead, all he says is, "All that was foretold will be made true. Light. Now turn back and die. I must not look on you. See, this is what I am. Son of parents I should not have known. I lived with those I should not have touched, and murdered those a man must not kill." So this is up until this point, he had still been questioning the shepherd and still getting the story. But then once he realizes the story, then that's what he says, which yeah, again, you would expect something more emotional. Now, maybe when this is delivered on stage, the actors ham it up a little bit more. I don't know. But the other thing I think of, I'm reminded of the documentary I watched on the production of the Oresteia, I think is how it's pronounced, where the director defends the decision to have the actors in masks, as was the ancient tradition in theater. And he said the thing about these old plays is they have such great emotions that the actors, if they were trying to portray these emotions, would be constantly in hysterics the whole time. So the masks deflect from that. It allows the actor to escape from the burden of having to portray all these hysterical emotions throughout the 2 hours of the play, or the 90 minutes of the play, and instead just kind of focus more on, I don't know, the dialogue or the story. So maybe that's what's going on here. maybe because in the ancient theater they would have been wearing the masks. You wouldn't have expected the actor to fully emote at this point. So Oedipus goes off. His mother Jocasta has hung herself, and he stabs out his eyes. Creon, his brother-in-law, who had been Jocasta's brother, and who at the beginning of the play, I brushed over this part, but maybe this is important. At the beginning of the play, when Oedipus first hears the prophecy he doesn't like, he thinks Creon is behind that prophecy. And he accuses Creon and abuses him. Verbally abuses him. And Creon tries to defend himself and say that he has never meant to betray Oedipus. There's one thing I must say here at first. One thing you must not say, I am innocent. You are stubborn, Oedipus. Your will is too hard. They're arguing back and forth. Creon keeps saying he's innocent, and Oedipus still keeps accusing him. So, excuse me. Quick drink of water there. Again, looking ahead to Antigone, which I vaguely remember from high school, and which takes place after Oedipus, although was written first. If memory serves, Creon is going to be the unreasonable one in that play, the one who is so certain and unbending. And I don't know if maybe his resentments, if Sophocles is maybe trying to set up that Creon has a reason to resent Oedipus because of the way he was treated in this play, which will cause him to be so harsh on Oedipus's offspring, which will be the subject of Antigone. But anyways, Oedipus blinds himself, and once at the end of Oedipus Rex, to return to this, Oedipus blinds himself. Creon comes back and is given the kingship because Oedipus demands that he be banished. Oedipus's daughters enter the stage now. Again, these are other characters who are going to go on to feature in Antigone. Antigone and Ismene. So Oedipus seems to feel both revulsion towards his offspring because he knows now that they were begotten by an incestuous relationship, which should never have been. But at the same time, still loves them. At the very end, he asks for his daughters to come with him, but Creon forbids it. Oedipus demands to be exiled. Creon says, "Go then and leave your children." Oedipus says, "You must not take them from me." Creon says, "You give commands as if you were king. You must remember your rule is over, and it could not save your life." Obviously not a very happy ending for the Oedipus family. So, like I said, this is my first time reading this play. I've also briefly explored some of the commentary behind it. I read the essay following it at the end of this book. I read most of the Wikipedia entry on it, although the Wikipedia entry indicates that there's a lot of commentary on this. I watched the crash course video on this by John Green, which was well done, and I'll try to remember to link to that in the description down below. It's very apparent that there's a lot of commentary on this play, going all the way back to ancient times. Aristotle, uh, apparently wrote extensively on this play. This is one of Aristotle's favorite plays, and Aristotle viewed this play as like the perfect form of tragedy, which is something that comes out a little bit in this essay at the end, although he doesn't mention Aristotle. But he does talk about how tightly organized the play is, with the different acts, each bringing forth a different episode, and also how there are two storylines going on simultaneously. So there's the present day, in which Oedipus is trying to unravel the mystery of who killed Laius, the old king of Thebes, so he can get rid of the plague. And then, while that storyline is playing out in the present, we are just given more and more information about what happened in the past, Oedipus's backstory, as he finds out eventually that he has killed his father and married his mother. Aristotle also, I think, thought this play was a perfect example of the hero with the tragic flaw. Freud also had a lot of thoughts on this play. So there's a lot of commentary on this play, and I have only very briefly skimmed it, so I don't want to try and wade into things I do not fully understand. It may be worthwhile to return to this play one day and see if I maybe get more out of it on a second reading, and maybe read up more on the commentary surrounding it, read some analysis of Greek tragedy or some books about ancient Greek tragedy. I may or may not never do that, but that would be an interesting reading project to do someday. For the moment, I guess all I really can comment on it is the readability of it. And it reads well. It's interesting. I mean, there's a looming sense of doom over it as you read it. Again, because I think most people who read this know the story. I think certainly it was intended to be performed in front of people who knew the story, or read by people who knew the story. So you're reading it, and you're reading all these warnings that Oedipus is getting. Not to ask too many questions, not to dig into this. And that looming doom creates a sense of horror, but it's a fascinating horror where you don't want him to find out the truth, and yet you can't stop turning the pages as he gets closer and closer to finding out the truth. So there's a tension in here which I think holds up. And I guess that's why this play has been so popular through the years. And I think I'll just leave it there, because if I were to say any more about it, I would probably be getting into things I don't fully understand. I mean, there's I guess the other question throughout this is Oedipus tries so hard to escape his fate, but the fates are just messing with him. And to a certain extent, you can't help but feel that the world is being really unfair to Oedipus. And I guess when you say the world here, you mean the people who are telling this story, because of course the whole story is made up. So, I mean, Oedipus tries so hard to avoid his fate. And there are, I mean, I know it's just a story, but there are people who maybe could have intervened ahead of time. Like, as Oedipus points out, this prophet, if this prophet knows so much, why didn't this prophet show up earlier and set things right? And I think Oedipus mocks the prophet for not being able to solve the riddle of the Sphinx, right? If he was such a great prophet, how come Oedipus had to come and solve the riddle of the Sphinx? But the prophet sends that back at him. You were always best at solving riddles, but here's a riddle which is going to undo you. Sorry, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, that whole question about fate. I mean, you get the sense that the people who wrote this story were just stacking the deck against Oedipus just to screw him over. But is there any lesson to be learned from all this, or any morals we can draw? Or, I think, again, I think there's a lot written on the story about the nature of fate and free will and whether it's possible to escape your destiny. But I haven't read all that. I mean, I'm aware that that commentary exists, but I haven't actually engaged with it. So I think I'm just going to leave it here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, I had mentioned that a project I'm going to try and do while I'm reading through these is if there's any professional adaptations, something that was put on mainstream television or a professional theatrical adaptation, like a movie adaptation, try and watch those if I can track them down. And it looks like there are two versions of Oedipus Rex that were filmed by, a proper movie company. One in 1957 and one in 1968. I'm only counting the English versions. And they are both on YouTube. So I'm going to take a break and watch those versions. I think I'll watch them both. Why not? They're both on YouTube. If I knew which one was better, I might choose the better one, but I don't know which one is better, so I'll just watch them both. And then once I finish watching the movie adaptations of this, then I'll go on to Antigone next, which Antigone I actually have read years and years and years ago when I was in high school. But first thing is I'll try and knock off the movie adaptations of Oedipus the King, which are available on YouTube.